Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us to learn a little bit more about the best practices to be presenting at the upcoming annual conference in Nashville. So we're excited that you're taking the time and effort to put together a proposal for us and present for the conference. As you know, the backbone of the conference is built on our members and people willing to speak and share what has worked for them in their offices and best practices in the field. So we appreciate you doing that and joining us here to kind of refine, hopefully, your presentation so that you can do the best you can at the upcoming conference. So I'm joined today by Linda Horisk. She's from Fordham University and is our chair of the Education Committee for NAGAP, and you'll be hearing from Linda shortly. And I just want to mention briefly, if you have any questions as we go through the session, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a questions box, and you can enter any questions that you have right in that box there. So if you want to say hi here, just so we know you're hearing us, let us know. And then we'll answer the questions as we go throughout the session. So hopefully this will be helpful for you as you're planning your slides and presentation for the upcoming conference. So we're going to just intro a little bit here, tell you a little bit about some information for you as a presenter and the things that you need to know as far as dates and important information about the space when you get there. Linda's going to talk to you a little bit about some guidelines and suggestions for content, and we'll talk about takeaways and final thoughts and answer any questions that you might have this afternoon. So quickly, before I pass over to Linda, we have emailed the PowerPoint template to you. If you have not received that already, please let us know so we can send that along. The slide template that you see us presenting on here is the slide template for the annual conference. Your abstract and learning objective edits were completed by the conference committee and are in, the brochure has already been sent to print and is on the website, so you'll see that information there. Please be sure to submit your final PowerPoint presentation to NAGAP on the PreSys site. That's the site where you originally submitted your proposal, and that's due by April 3rd, so a couple weeks in advance, or just under a couple weeks in advance of the conference. Wi-Fi is not available in the meeting rooms. So if you did request internet during the proposal process, then you will have internet that's been hardwired to the machine in your particular room. But Wi-Fi is not otherwise available. So if you need internet, unfortunately, the Wi-Fi will not be available there. We will load all the presentations onto the laptop that's provided to you, but if you have any updated files, of course, many of you will, after you submit, will decide to add some content or maybe change something about your session. Just bring along a flash drive, or if you have internet, you would be able to connect to Google Drive or Dropbox or something, and we can help you with that. We will have professionals on staff available to help you with loading your presentations and help you with microphones and things if you have any trouble. If you have any video files in your session, make sure that you bring them on a flash drive and load them onto the computer locally and make sure that they work. So before you get your session going at the conference, and you have a video file, make sure that you're able to play that video file before you get started. Oftentimes your PowerPoint will not embed your video if it's a large video, so you need to have that loaded locally on the computer so that your PowerPoint is referencing that particular file. Also, and I can say this from personal experience, even on the board, we forget to do these things. I showed up at the conference a couple years ago and had not registered for the conference, so be sure that you register for the conference. And book your hotel room. The hotel blocks are starting to fill, so be sure you get that in early. We're at a fantastic location this year right in downtown Nashville at the Omni, so it's going to be a really popular spot. So be sure to register for the conference and book your hotel room as soon as possible. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Linda and have her take over the next set of slides.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Linda Horisk, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Admissions and Enrollment here at Fordham University's Graduate School of Education. And as Marcus told you, I am the chair of the Education Committee and also the president of one of NAGAP's chapter, which is a group of Jesuit admissions and enrollment people. So just to give you a little bit of background about the work of the Education Committee, what we've been doing over the last 3.5 years is kind of setting a curriculum for NAGAP's professional development efforts, whether it's our magazine or our webinar series or our conference or our institutes. And what we did was we identified themes for about 5 years out, And we're in about year 3 of that now, and very much aligning the themes and what we call our educational domains and topics that we want to explore, aligning those themes with our curriculum. And what we do each year is, with every new theme, we come up with ideas for topics based on what our membership seems to be interested in, whether or not we get that information anecdotally, through surveys, or through the post-event surveys and evaluations that we do. We get lots of information that way, and then we try to bring to you some of the things that you might be interested in, and always keeping in mind that we want to be as current as we can in what we are offering in the way of professional development, keeping in mind that we want to be sure that we are giving you more and more information and strategies as we move, many of us move in our schools to a more graduate enrollment management model, where, you know, we're not just an admissions organization anymore. And that kind of came about gradually, but really has picked up momentum given the changes going on in many universities with their structures and their way of looking at their graduate schools. And so, next slide, please. And so what I wanted to kind of go through was just some elements of a successful presentation. And there's one thing that I've done before when I present, and that is you can get ahead of time a list of the people who have RSVP that they want to attend your session. You know, when you do the application for registration, you are asked what sessions you would like to attend. Of course, you're not held to that, but if you kind of have an idea of the type of people who are going to be in your audience ahead of time, it can really help you when you're right at the end there and you're fine-tuning your presentation. So what my group did was we actually sent an article and sent a little quasi assignment for people to start thinking about, so that when they came into the presentation, they had more of an idea of what we were going to be doing and how they could share the information. So you might want to consider something like that as well, and it can really enhance the experience of your 1-hour presentation. When you are planning your presentation also, we would like you to give just a quick overview of your institution and how your institution is organized. Are you, I don't know if you can hear me. I have your attention, please. All right, it's only a test of the fire drill, so I won't be running out on you here. Of your institution, and you would do that for anyone who's in your group also. Kind of the size, are you centralized, decentralized? What products are you using? Are you a banner school? Are you a slate school? Are you using Hobson? That kind of thing. What is your student population like? It really is helpful for your audience members to have this kind of information, so that they can say, oh, wow, this is a small school too, so I'm really going to listen up because maybe some of my issues are very similar. Or what can I learn from a small school if I'm a really big school? Those kinds of things. So, and again, just kind of keep it brief. You, again, just the way that we did here, had an overview and an agenda. And when you are working with your content, you want it to really have a very clear beginning, middle, and end. And you want to make sure that the learning objectives that you submitted with your proposal are used in your presentation also. So that would kind of be part of your introduction. And this is what you're going to be taking away from. This is what, and we talk about learning objectives, we are talking about very concrete, actionable things that people can do with the information that you've presented, with the new learning that they have attained. So those learning objectives are really going to help you formulate the outline for the content. For each section of your presentation, you should have some kind of actionable takeaways, or Marcus likes to call them assignments. that you're giving people. And we're going to have some more specific examples of these here in a moment. But when you do this, what you're doing is you're chunking the learning. And so, indeed, you're not just giving a whole bunch of information and say, okay, now take this and run with it, and you can do A, B, C, and D. But rather, if you're presenting on a topic, let's say, of creating new ways of funding your graduate students, so you have one section that's on how to collect and analyze financial aid distribution data, and then you'll have some takeaways there, some little things that people can do. Here are some actionable objectives for you. Then you have another section that is on taking a look at external sources of funding and ways that you can increase your internal funding as well through endowments, let's say, and some actionable items. And then finally, here is a plan that you can, a sample plan that you can do to make all of this happen in your school, and then another set of takeaways for that section. So when you chunk the material, what you're doing actually is giving people a chance to kind of intensify their learning, bring it to a new level, because you're making it meaningful, you're breaking it down, and you're making a real clear connection to what it is that they do in their daily lives and how it's similar for them and for you as the presenter. You're going to look for opportunities for audience engagement also. So using that same example of the financial aid disbursement, okay, how many of your schools, you might ask just real quickly, do a quick little poll. How many of you have financial aid in your school? How many of you front load it and give more to new students than to continuing students? As you ask questions like that, even just a show of hands, or if someone can share a brief little piece of information, it's really going to give you a way to go as you're talking, because you're really thinking and editing your presentation on your feet, and when you get to know your audience. That's what helps also with that pre-work if you choose to get the list of the people who are interested in your presentation. It's always a good idea to find out who your audience is ahead of time in some way. I'm sure many of you do that when you're doing new student orientation, or when you're doing a program for prospective students also. You know, how many of you are here for this? How many of you are here for that? So it really helps you to modify on the spot and kind of be an improv presenter, so to speak. At the end, you would want to make sure that you do some kind of a review, some kind of a recap. Do provide time for question and answers. You can do that throughout. You can do that at the end. But audience engagement is a really important piece. You just have to be savvy enough on your feet in order to be able to moderate that in a bit, so that perhaps one or two people don't dominate the time remaining also. And then what we have found and gotten accolades for in surveys is for the presenters who share some kind of a bibliography, links to articles or videos, contact referrals, journal articles, books that they've used for research, but anything where if somebody wants to take that one step further, they can go and do more research. So hopefully these suggestions are helpful to you. And just some, this would be what you would include. This is what I was speaking about earlier, the relevant information about the presenters that you would want to share. And so you would have these on one of your initial slides in your presentation. Once again, you know, are they using a gem structure, maybe a brief description of it. You do not want to get too lengthy on this part, because you know they will have many of your participants are going to walk into your session. They're already going to have their own printout of your presentation, and then if you make modifications or if you have a more in-depth copy of your presentation, because you know you don't want to be too wordy on each page, unlike some of our slides. You know, so Marcus and I were just chuckling that sometimes we don't practice what we preach when we do this presentation. But it would be very helpful for people to have something from you, and we do give you the option of uploading after the conference as well, in case you have more information for your participants, and maybe even for others who might say, wow, I didn't get to go to that one, but I want to make myself a copy or download the presentation. Okay, next slide, Marcus. And so a little bit about learning objectives. Now, you had a handout that you might have looked at when you wrote your proposal. And oftentimes the conference committee will go through those and do some rewrites on them if they are not written in the appropriate format that we gave, and just kind of spruce them up just a little bit so that they're more clear and they're all consistent as well. So you would want to review your learning objectives and make sure that they're aligned to your content, or that your content really is aligned to what you said your learning objectives were going to be. There's nothing more disappointing to a conference attendee who goes to a session and, wow, this isn't what I expected. And those are the people you usually see walking out about 5 to 10 minutes in when they realize that this is not going to apply to me. The abstract and the learning objectives that I read this isn't what's going on in here. So make sure that you do, be concise and clear with that. Your learning objectives should be actionable. We don't want to see, the participant will be able to. You would just start each learning objective with an action verb. We gave you a list of those, and I'm sure there are others that you would be able to add to the list as well. You would want to integrate these learning objectives throughout your presentation with your takeaways or your assignments. What we hear time and again is that people want concrete ideas. What am I going to do on Monday? What am I going to be able to do when I go back to the office? Because they're still jazzed about what they learned, and they want to do something, and they want to get started right away. Albeit some of the things that you're going to be talking about are going to be things that are going to take a long time, but if there's some little kernel or two that they can take home and do on Monday morning, it can be very, very rewarding for them. And we do read about this in the evaluations that are done. We also send you the evaluations of your particular sessions as well. Another thing that you want to keep in mind, too, about your learning objectives is to have some kind of data and maybe some research that you can cite to reinforce what it is you're talking about. So let's say you're talking about aspects of leadership. You might want to include perhaps some quotes, some ideas from different leadership researchers and theorists that you are talking about, but just to kind of give some more depth. If there is something that you're talking about, and this is what we ended up doing at my institution, and take it a step further, and here's how it works. We saw an increase in applications by 93% in our first year. I mean, you can tell I'm making this stuff up, right? 93%, we should all hope. But people do want to hear that kind of stuff. That could nicely appear in some kind of a chart form, some kind of graph, so that people can have a deeper understanding. Well, here's how it worked, and here's some concrete evidence. And then anytime that you can share a story, it can be very, very powerful. You would want to be succinct so that you don't take up too much time from the more meaty part of your presentation, but indeed to have some kind of a personal connection that you have had with the particular topic can be real important. And so, can we move to the next one? Okay, so when we're talking about the assignments or takeaways, this is, very, very important piece of this presentation of yours. This is the part that somebody's going to do something and put your ideas, what they've learned from you, into action. So can we move to the next one, and we'll take a look at maybe what some examples might be. Okay, so one thing that we know about the way that people learn is that the brain learns when it can make meaning. So if you are presenting and or teaching about something in particular, so let's use that financial aid example that we were talking about before, in figuring out a new way for your financial aid disbursements, once your brain is able to plug in what you're telling them to something real and concrete, it's going to make more meaning for them, and it's going to help them to store the knowledge longer and in a deeper way also. So when people are doing things, we want to make it clear to them with the takeaways and the language that you use in your takeaways, in your learning objectives. So let's take a look just at the words that are underlined here. So when to modify, create, take a leadership assessment, bring staff to member, create, conduct, assess, identify. These are something that you can actually see happening. You can see someone sitting down and taking a leadership assessment test. You can see people trying to figure out and identify factors that influence student success. So we're not going to use a takeaway, understand elements of student success. That's way too vague. It's way too fuzzy for us to see what that looks like. And so what you want to do is I don't know how many of you know about Bloom's taxonomy of learning, but what we're trying to do is to bump up the learning from the, participants will understand something, or they will comprehend it, or they will make a list of all of everything they learned. That's more at a recall level. What we want you to do is to ask people to take what they learn and to put it into action. We want them to analyze it. We want them to use their critical thinking skills. And we want what you talk to them about to be backed up by a knowledge level, by data, and by giving them where to go to get more research on the particular topic. And again, this is something that it's not just the education committee sitting down and trying to make this more demanding for our presenters, because we welcome you and rely on you, but rather we're basing this on what we've heard from our participants. Okay, next one, please.
All right, so Linda jumped in and talked about this before as far as the amount of text on your slides. And here is a perfect example of too much text on a slide, so we figured we'd just demonstrate that for you. Unfortunately, we're not going for an Oscar with our PowerPoint slide, but what we want you to do is make sure that you're keeping a balance between what kind of narrative you can provide at the conference to the folks that are there. And Linda talked about sharing a story or talking about experiences that you've had. We also want you to be careful that it's not a biography. We've certainly all been to those sessions where you just talk about, well, this is what we did. Well, what did you learn? And what types of best practices are out there? So those are all very important. A lot of the information that you see on this slide is no-brainer stuff. Many of you presented before, so we certainly don't want you to feel like we're talking down to you and that you don't already know this. But we just want to make sure that you've touched on these points as you think about your presentation. Obviously, you don't want your PowerPoint to become a script. These bullet points can be points for talking. You want talking points that can give you these stories and points of references, but you don't want to be reading a script off of your slide. Also, think about Linda mentioned using a story to illustrate a particular point, but think about your presentation as a story. You've got a beginning, middle, and an end, so how can you kind of develop that story and think of pieces? I often present on marketing, so I always start with knowing the basics of who you are as an institution and who you're trying to attract. Then you take that information and you learn about channels that can get to those audiences. Then you actually deploy and you learn about those audiences, what they're doing. And then you do return on investment to determine how those channels are performing, and then you kind of wrap it up, and then it's kind of a circular story that I'm telling about from start to finish. This is how you would do this. It wouldn't make too much sense if I started with the ROI discussion and then moved backward. So I'd rather tell that story that's in a step sequence. So many topics lend themselves well to kind of telling that story in a more linear way. Make sure that your slides are readable. This is something that, traditionally you don't want to be any smaller than 28-point font. We all stretch that a little bit, but that's a fairly common practice. You don't want, some of these rooms are very long, so if you've got people sitting in the back and they can't read it, that's very difficult. Linda also talked about engaging your audiences, so create opportunities for meaningful connections. If you can use imagery or even videos if you feel it's appropriate to connect and talk more about some of these engaging opportunities within your topic area. But also keep in mind that there are copyright laws with using some things. So I often, if I pull an image from somewhere, I will put the URL, say, in a footnote, but then at the end of the presentation have a more detailed kind of bibliography of items that were used. We often think that the more we can throw in front of people, the better. In reality, is the less that you can provide there with more quality is better. So go for quality over quantity. That's always more important. So put the most important things here as talking points and get into that depth later on. Think about the best presentations you've ever gone to. The more memorable ones are ones that have something that sticks out specifically in your brain. That's something you want to take back later on. So if you throw a lot at people, it's going to be very difficult for them to consume it in a meaningful way and then be able to have an interactive dialogue with you and be able to process that information and use it in their own work. And then Linda also mentioned make sure you upload a more detailed version of your presentation after the conference if you'd like, but again, don't use that encyclopedia version at the conference. Try to avoid, if you use images, don't use images with small text. If you do use images with small text, use opportunities in PowerPoint, for example, has custom animations. Many of you probably use those. So use that to zoom in on something, and I'll show you a couple of examples. Use high contrast. You'll notice in these templates, and I'm the one who builds these templates, so if you don't like them, you can blame me. But you'll notice that we deliberately use high contrast. So in the header on this particular slide, you see there's white text on a blue background. For the light blue background in the body, we have dark black text. So those things make it a lot easier to read from a distance. So keep that in mind when you're using various things in your presentation so that folks from further away can see things and make them relevant. Make sure you're using images that help demonstrate what you're trying to say and that they're relevant to your content. Oftentimes folks will put in, particularly clip art. Clip art is overused generally, unless it's something that's really adding relevance. Clip art generally should be avoided. But imagery that might support what you're doing is certainly helpful. But think about how those images will be construed. We certainly have a varied audience of a lot of different experiences and backgrounds. So some images may touch a nerve with some people, so make sure that you're not using images that are not politically correct. Make sure that you're using images that can be seen. If you put a tiny image in the corner of your slide, it's very difficult to see. Use something that is at least a quarter size of your slide, if not more, and then again add attribution. If you know where it came from, say where it came from. I saw a very impactful presentation recently that was 100% images. The entire presentation was images, and the story was woven over the top of that as part of the presentation. That's what the woman was speaking about. Now, in fairness, it was about historic preservation. That's a program we have here at Roger Williams University. So we were listening to her talk about these buildings and how they've been restored. So photography obviously lends itself well to that topic. So if you have a topic that lends itself to those things, imagery can be very helpful. But it was also very intriguing because we weren't reading off of a slide. We were hearing her story. We were hearing her inflection in her voice. We were hearing the emotion behind what she was talking about. So that was a lot more impactful than just reading some slide notes that were put in front of her. So here's just a couple of quick examples about some of the imagery. So this is a request information form that we pulled from the Fordham website. So you might be demonstrating that this is the type of form that we use to collect information for students, and then you can tell there's small text on there. It might be hard, especially for somebody further away to see. So you might zoom in and say, okay, the areas of interest drop down on the inquiry form. This is what it looks like. So you zoom in on what that is, and you take a screenshot of those options. Similarly, here at Roger Williams, we have these landing pages for each program. So I might be trying to demonstrate how we use this for marketing efforts, and I really want to underscore what types of program highlights that I like to use, so that are more important than others. So then I could zoom in and use that. Again, this is just taking a screenshot, cropping it, and then just resizing it all within PowerPoint. It doesn't require any particular skill sets. But then you can zoom in on that and have that appear closer up on the screen so that people can read it. So that can be very helpful. If you're using any sorts of video or animation, we give you a sample here that you can go through this link, and we can provide these slides for you as well. But this is a really good YouTube video on having a really successful presentation. But unless it's downloaded from the web, or it's something that you've created from your campus and hosted within the PowerPoint, I mentioned embedded video earlier on. If you're doing something like from YouTube, you're going to need internet access. So again, if you don't have internet access, you're going to need to have that video natively on your computer. And there are ways to lift video off YouTube. I would not recommend it, especially with copyright infringement. So make sure that you have internet if you need it. If it's embedded in if you have a saved video file, it's not a URL, make sure you have that extra backup on a USB drive that you can load onto the local computer. So again, not all presentation rooms have access, but remember, keep things relevant. It's easy to throw in a video and say this will eat up 5 or 10 minutes so that I can fill my full 45 minutes to an hour, but rather use things that are really impactful and helpful to the topic that you're providing. And I'd avoid extra long videos. Certainly the shorter the better, but more impactful. After you've completed your presentation, this goes without saying, practice it if you can. We all have different ways of practicing it. For me personally, practicing in front of an audience would just stress me out, so I personally would not do that. I don't like this portion of the preparation, but for those of you that feel inclined that that's something you're willing to do, it's certainly very helpful to practice in front of an audience. You can get feedback, kind of see how people are reacting to the content that you're providing. It also helps you with timing. I know that for me personally, timing is my #1 problem because I am long-winded, as you can probably tell. So I fill an hour really quickly. So that's always a struggle for me because I don't always practice, and I don't like standing in front of a mirror doing it either. But then I get to the session and go, oh, I have to cram in the last 20 slides, and I've got 5 minutes because I didn't time appropriately. So make sure that whatever method you use, whether it be just talking it out to yourself or standing in front of a mirror or in front of a significant other, or you get a small audience together, time that out and find out how long your session is. If you feel inclined, many folks find it helpful to record your session if you can. I mean, we all have smartphones now that make it very easy to record your voice and record a video of your speaking. And try out a practice session and critique how you feel that how your presentation went. How was your delivery? How was your voice? Were you clear? Were you talking too fast? Again, one of my #1 problems is I talk too fast. So things that the more aware you are of those weaknesses, the more you can make sure you address them as you present, both before and during the conference. But get that feedback, edit things, improve them. Again, if you make edits to your session after you've uploaded on April 3rd, that's okay. Then you can just bring it on a flash drive and we'll upload the most current one. It's perfectly fine that you make edits between that time and the start of the conference. Engage your audience as much as you can. Be mindful of your body language and your tone of voice, making eye contact with people. For some people, that's more difficult than others, but try to practice that if you can. Avoid going too long with your biographical sketch. It's very easy to talk about your school and what you do and the projects that you're working on and all of that. But if you eat up 10 or 15 minutes of time, that's 10 or 15 minutes of value that you could have been providing with best practices and things. Make sure you provide steps and actions. So, and Linda mentioned I call them homework assignments. I guess that's coming from a teacher family. That's how I try to deliver those. But provide anything that people can take right back, and particularly actionable items that can be done right away. That's really helpful. Share data, show your return on investment, talk about your successes and failures. Failures in particular, it's good because it adds authenticity to what you're doing, for one, and two, allows people to understand the pitfalls that they should avoid. So if you can underscore any times that you had not only successes but failures, that's important. Make sure, again, with timing, and again, a problem for me, if you push right through your full hour and then you have no time for Q&A, then you're keeping people long, or you have to have people stay later and then the rest of the group leaves. And so it can often be uncomfortable if you blaze right through an hour and then you say, oh, sorry, we don't have time for Q&A, but I'll stay late. Many of us do that. Some people are okay with that, but it's more beneficial that you'll find a lot of the people are asking similar questions. So if they're asked in front of the group in that time that you've allotted, it's more beneficial to everybody, and then you don't have to repeat your answer multiple times for people. If you're working with multiple presenters, make sure you balance your time. Pose open-ended questions to your groups and encourage engagement. Obviously, yes or no questions. If you think from a reporter lens, if you're trying to ask what happened, if you say to somebody, did the fire happen in the kitchen? They go, yes, then that's all you're going to get. But you say, where did the fire happen and what exactly caused it? Well, then they're forced to talk a little bit more in depth about what happened. So those are important things to remember. And encourage people to post anything that they learn in your session on Twitter with the hashtag NAGAPLearns. And we're going to try to aggregate all of those responses again this year so that there's some key takeaways that we can provide for you as you leave the conference.
And Marcus, don't forget to mention the prize for the most tweets.
Oh, right, yes. This year we haven't ironed out all the specifics for that, but we used NAGAP Learns last year, and if you noticed, a couple of us were the most frequently tweeted people, so we don't want to continue doing that on the board. We want to have our membership continue that, but we've seen some growth in that, which is good. So each day of the conference, we generally do a small giveaway, and usually that's a gift card or something, and a NAGAP giveaway for those that are tweeting the most and retweeted the most using NAGAP Learns. And then we'll have one large prize for kind of a winner for the entire conference. So be sure to use NAGAP Learns both as an attendee to your sessions, but also as a presenter, and encourage your attendees to as well.
Okay, and just to let you know that you will have a support system with you there in the room when you're presenting. Each session is assigned a moderator and a recorder. So the moderator will keep you on time. They'll do a brief introduction. You kind of work that out with them. You can do that ahead of time because you will be assigned a moderator and recorder, and you'll get that in email form. And what's usually a good thing to do is to reach out to both of them, send them a copy of your presentation ahead of time so that they have it, so that they'll, kind of know where you are in the presentation, and that can help them with time. It will also help the recorder as they're taking notes if they have to refer back to something, and then when they go to do the actual writing. A good practice for you also is to have the recorder send you his or her summary so that you can edit it and that you can make sure that all of the information is correctly portrayed, because these summaries will appear in the summer edition of the NAGAP magazine Perspectives. So you want to be sure that you get to take a look at that. You don't want to open that magazine up in summer and read about your session and it doesn't sound like the same session that you presented at. So just keep those few little things in mind. Next one. And then just some final things from me before Marcus, concludes our session here today with you, is that another thing is to really try to figure out a way to keep the conversation going with the people who were in your group, and then maybe, through their connections, spread out the discussion even a little bit more. When you're at the end of the session, find out from them. Do your own little mini assessment. What were the most important things you learned today? I need to know this so that it'll help me to learn and it'll help everybody else in the room. And you'll hear some things, perhaps they were little asides that you talked about, or just, an anecdote that you shared, or a story about what you've done, or just some element of the research that you used or the data you presented. Your final words of wisdom, your summarizing yes, and then ways that you can keep people connected is maybe post some follow-up questions and ask your people before they leave to keep, to be checking a particular web page or social media, We've had people post discussion questions on LinkedIn. What I did after one of the presentations was I asked everybody when they came in, and you might want to do this as well, is to drop a business card on a table or in a hat or a bowl or, something like that, a bag. And then I brought all of those back and had it made into a spreadsheet so that I had everybody's name, school, and what they did, as well as their email addresses, and then sent things out to them later. So I sent the bibliography electronically so that they had that, and then posed some questions, and and people were able to kind of break off. I sent that with their permission. I said, if you give me your business card, that's giving me your permission to share the spreadsheet, and gave them the spreadsheet so that they had everybody's contact info also with the people that they met in the particular session. So it's just a way to kind of keep the conversation moving along and providing a network on that particular topic as well. Other people have shared that they plan to meet up for later on in the conference, like let's all meet during the afternoon break on Friday and have some coffee together, and maybe we have some more questions for each other by then. So just some ways for you to encourage that, and it will help you to learn as well. Next one. Okay, now back to Marcus.
Sorry, I was muted. Here I'm talking to myself again. So for those of you who've been to our session before, you know that Linda and I have frequently mentioned this, but remember that we work in education, so we want to try to be mindful that we're teaching each other, and certainly we work in an industry that many of us are in offices that are limited staffed with limited resources. So we need to rely on each other to provide best practices and talk about theories and data and things. I just had a colleague of mine call yesterday about how graduate enrollment is going to deal with the new prior reporting with the FAFSA, and it was something that has largely not been on our radar here, but it's a good conversation for us to start having. And of course, many of our institutions are not very proactive with some of these issues, so it's helpful for us to make sure that we're all keeping each other on each other's toes, providing data, providing opportunities to process these things, talk at the conferences. We all talk about the value that we get outside of the sessions, the conferences, but we also want to make sure that we're providing really deep and great value within these sessions. So that engagement and sharing of information and having key takeaways with assignments or whatever you choose to call them are all very important to make sure that we're all getting something valuable that we can implement quickly, and keeping in mind that we don't necessarily have a giant staff or a giant budget to implement a lot of these things. Be a mentor. A lot of folks will present at these conferences, and you're presenting information that presumably many of the audience members don't know. That's why they're there, or they want to get more information about something. So on your final slide, include the information that you feel comfortable with, but it's particularly helpful if you have your contact information so that people can stay in touch. Oftentimes, I've had people contact me years after giving a presentation and say, oh, you gave a presentation at such and such, and I just want to follow up with you if you have any suggestions on this. That's all very helpful. If you can provide some sort of contact information, your photo so that people can remember you, especially if they print out your presentation or look at it later. We're all meeting a lot of people. We all meet a lot of students. We know how difficult it is to remember folks, but any information that you can provide to make sure that people can still connect with you and recognize you as an expert, that's a good thing for you, and it's a good thing for all of the attendees at your session. So to be sure that to include all that information to the extent that you can. So keeping with that, you see that's me on the left, and you've got Linda on the right-hand side with our contact information as well as our websites. So please feel free to contact either one of us, and we're happy to serve as a resource for you, and we'll certainly be in Nashville in April, so we'd love to meet all of you. So at this point, we can entertain any questions that you might have. As I mentioned, there's a questions box on the right-hand side, and so you can enter them there. I see that we have a few questions already, so I'll try to go through those quickly. The first one that's I guess we're talking about as far as the Twitter contest for NAGAP Learn. So the question was, are we going to get a new car? Unfortunately, we can't give away a car for the contest, but that would be fun. There was a question regarding learning objectives earlier on, and the question was, should we specifically say that a certain concept addresses a specific learning objective? And the answer to that is no, and I think we don't necessarily want to have a prescribed, we're not going to be testing the presenters on how well they spoke to the learning objectives put together in the proposal. I think you just want to make sure that your presentation is integrating all of those various objectives and using concepts that support each of those things. So just illustrating them is really key. I think that's better than specifically saying something addresses a particular item. And the follow-up question from the same individual was, will we have wireless microphones available in the rooms? And generally they do. Linda, I don't know if you know any more specifics about that at the Omni.
About what at the Omni?
Will we have wireless microphones in each of the rooms?
You had to ask for those ahead of time. When you did your proposal, there was a place for you to ask for things. So go back. Are you able, if you're able to go back into Presys to see what you asked for, or if you made a copy of it? Otherwise, you can contact Christy Ross, and her email address is cross, R-O-S-S, at goamp. What is it, Marcus? Is it com?
.com. Yep.
.com.
Yep.
So that's CROSS at goamp.com.
Great. And a couple of folks asked about getting a list of people who had said, excuse me, that they would be coming to a particular session. And I know that we collect that during the registration process. One caution I would say is that list is generally very unreliable, because if you're like any of us, you indicate on the registration what you're going to go to, and then when you get to the conference and you get the book and you start reading all the session stuff again, you're like, oh, I'm going to go to this one, and oh, my colleague's here, so we're going to split. We're going to divide and conquer and go to something else. So we use those primarily just to make sure we have enough seats in rooms to accommodate particular sessions and find out which ones are more popular. But Linda, I don't know, have we released lists of attendees that are saying that they're going to a specific session? I can imagine that it might be very laborious to do that. But
yes, I've asked for them before and gotten them.
Okay. So who's the best contact?
Christy.
Christy as well? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so if anyone would like a list of people that are saying that they're going to your session, please feel free to contact Christy, and she'll see what she can do for you in getting that. It is not sent automatically, by the way, so if you would like it, you would have to just request that from Christy. Question, as a first-time attendee, how many people can we expect to have in our session? I mean, generally, I haven't seen much less than 10 in a given session, but depending on your topic, I've seen a full room of 100 people. So it generally varies. I don't know, Linda, if you have anything more.
Same thing. Yeah. If you're bringing anything for people, I would plan to bring 50, 75. Some of the rooms are very big. I haven't seen the site. I'm not on the committee anymore, so I haven't done a site visit. But over the years, we have increased space, our space qualifications when we go and visit hotels. So, we had rooms last year that held about 150 people. So you'd walk in and, maybe half the room was filled, but it was, in other hotels we had used, it would have been a full room. Sometimes you have standing room only. You just kind of don't know. That's, that's what happens when you have, a full catalog of choices also. And we're piloting something this year where on Friday afternoon there is a dual plenary session. So there are two bigger name people who are going to be doing sessions at the same time, and you pick one or the other.
This is also a great opportunity, I think, to think about collecting business cards, as Linda had suggested, whether that be in a fishbowl or just have people drop them off when they get to your session or what have you. But if you have a room, if you're bringing handouts, for example, and you bring 50 of them, I mean, many of us don't want to travel with a stack of handouts, and they're expensive if you go to the copy center at the hotel. You might bring 50 handouts and then say anybody who else wants them, just drop your business card and we'll email it out to you. Or just email it to everybody. Don't bring handouts at all if that's something you're thinking about. And it can be a little apprehensive if you're presenting for the first time as well and you're not sure if you're going to be standing in front of 5 people or 100. So it's very difficult to predict. Certain sessions certainly garner more attention than others. Our membership is still largely skewed toward marketing and recruitment efforts and admissions operations things. So a lot of those types of topics will often get large crowds. But we're starting to move that, as Linda talked about, with more of a GEM focus in the broader life cycle. There's one question here about, do we have any tips for multiple presentation leaders and how to best balance sharing the talking time or content? Linda, do you want to field that one?
Yeah, I would. Sometimes it ends up to be, a bunch of talking heads, and you don't want that. So you kind of want them to work together. Sometimes just breaking up, even the way that we did it today. We try to go back and forth a little bit, but it depends on what your topic is. So if you're doing something where you're talking about data, data analysis, and 4 people are talking about the way that they do it at their school, you might be better served to do a panel discussion instead, and one of you be the one who asks the questions. So if whoever asked that question, if you would like to email me separately, and if you can send me a copy of your proposal, and then maybe we can have a chat about some ways of keeping people engaged and having multiple presenters.
Great, I would echo that. I think that's all.
Yeah.
It's always tricky with multiple presenters, but if you all have having a structure ahead of time is very helpful, because the last thing you want is one presenter to go off on a tangent for half an hour, and all of a sudden you have no time to get everybody in, and then your Q&A disappears, and then somebody has to cut short and all that. So having a structure certainly helps. So I don't see that there are any further questions at this point. So as we mentioned, you have my contact information and Linda's as well. So we're happy to help with any questions that you may have and also serve as a resource for you at the conference. We're members of our NAGAP board, and there's roughly 13 of us. Linda, I might have that number a little bit off, but we don't bite. We're pretty easygoing people, and we'll be among you as attendees of the conference as well, and hopefully you'll take an opportunity to meet us and connect with us throughout the conference, and hope to maybe get involved with NAGAP as well. We'd love to have you as part of the ranks to help support the growth of the organization and providing further opportunities for professional development and growth in the future. So thank you all for your time, and we look forward to seeing you in Nashville in a few weeks, and hopefully we'll catch you, get out now some country music down at some of the bars on down in the honky tonks there in central Nashville. So thanks so much again for your time, and have a great afternoon.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Marcus.